Had fourth quarter chances to tie, but twice stopped on fourth down. They were quarterbacked by veteran Josh McCown, made his postseason debut at age 40. Carson Wentz, injured in Philly's last two playoffs, made his postseason debut, but left in the first quarter with a head injury. Seattle on Sunday plays at Green Bay. Knicks lost a wild one in L.A. to the Clippers, 135-132. College hoops, St. John's fell at Xavier, 75-67. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
Thank you, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on SoftBank and why its problems are much bigger than WeWork. Also in this week's issue, how climate change helped spark a revolt in Chile. Christina Lindblad contributed to the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
We looked at these water fights that have been playing out and how these protests, you can't say they literally jumped from rural areas to the city, but there's definitely been this echoes of like unequal access to water equals unequal access to education, unequal access to opportunity.
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, Nathan. New York has some of the worst rankings for hospital quality and safety in the country. Potential reasons for those poor ratings include limited state fines imposed on hospitals that put patients at risk, as well as failure to implement best practices. That's according to a report from the New York Public Interest Research Group. Bed Bath & Beyond plans to sell about half of its real estate to a private equity firm and lease back the space. Sources tell Dow Jones 2.1 million square feet of space sold to Oak Street Real Estate Capital includes the company's Union, New Jersey headquarters. And 3 Portland area entrepreneurs hope to open the town's first brewery later this year in a rented warehouse space in the town's industrial park. Middleton Press says the Concentric Brewing Company plans a brew pub and a beer garden on the ProMold Plastics campus on Main Street. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thanks, Ed. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. Pier 1 plans to shut more stores in an expanded turnaround effort.
I'm Jeff Bellinger. And on Kogo in San Diego, I'm reporting soaring insurance premiums are deterring some would-be home buyers in parts of California prone to wildfires.
I'm Caroline Hepgold, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the start of the contest for the leadership of the Labour Party.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that Borden has become the second milk producer in less than 2 months to file for bankruptcy.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world, a morning that is seeing risk assets fall and havens rise. S&P futures are lower by 19 points now. Dow futures down 172. NASDAQ futures lower by 64 points. European equities down more than 1% across the board. The 10-year in the U.S. is up 1/32nd, yield 1.78%, and gold is higher by 1.7%. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seizechange.
change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is your boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run, mix it.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel but at Money Supermarket, we make you feel That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value, with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 500-gram tub of Anchor Salted Spreadable from £3.50 to just £2. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 14th of January.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Al-Shabaab extremists have stormed a key military base used by U.S. counter-terror forces in Kenya. As a result, 3 Americans are dead. Correspondent Fari Savenzo.
Now, what we know now is that 1 United States serviceman and 2 contractors for the Department of Defense were killed in that attack. U.S. Africa Commander also tells us that 2 further contractors were injured, and at the moment they're stable and are being evacuated.
Iranian General Esmail Ghani, who replaced Qasem Soleimani, the Quds Force leader killed by a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad, is vowing revenge against the U.S. Iraq's parliament is calling for the expulsion of American troops. Meantime, President Trump has ordered 3,500 troops to the region. Harvey Weinstein is expected to be in court today as his lawyers and a judge prepare for his rape trial. Jury selection is scheduled to start this week. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks extending their losses and oil is building on gains as investors continue to grapple with the fallout from a U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. Heavens are climbing, with gold surging to the highest in more than 6 years. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 21 points. Dow futures down 187 and NASDAQ futures down 70. The DAX in Germany is down 1.7%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1% or 62 cents at $63.67 a barrel, and COMEX gold is up 1.7% or $27 at $15.79.40 an ounce. The euro 1.1196 against the dollar, British pound 1.3164, and the yen at 108. Bloomberg News has learned the Chinese trade delegation plans to sign the first phase of its trade deal with the U.S. in Washington on January 15th. And milk producer Borden has filed for bankruptcy. The company, which was founded more than 160 years ago, has been hurt by rising milk prices and competition from almond, rice, and soy milk. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, thank you. France's finance minister says the current tensions in the Middle East could affect global economic growth and reinvigorate Islamic State group extremists. He said today on France Interradio that you must always ask who is served by and who profits from this instability. The instability in the Middle East today benefits only one organization, the Islamic State group. He added that it will increase the terrorist threat over France and Europe. There's late word a 5.7 magnitude earthquake has rattled Puerto Rico. In the NFL's wild card playoffs, the Seahawks beat the Eagles 17-9 to advance to the divisional round. The Vikings eliminated the Saints in overtime 26-20. In the NBA, the Knicks lost. In the NHL, the Capitals won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:49 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. We continue to follow developments on ramped-up tensions between the U.S. and Iran, and between the U.S. and Iraq now, following the killing of Iraqi General Soleimani. For details, let's bring in Bloomberg's senior reporter for international affairs, Mark Champion, joining us this morning from our London bureau. It's interesting, Mark, prior to the killing of Soleimani, there had been widespread protest in Iran against the government. Now we're seeing widespread mourning as hundreds, if not thousands, turn out to mourn the death of Soleimani as his body is returned to Tehran. Is his killing papering over some of the differences we've seen in Iran?
Yes. I mean, essentially, it can seem a little odd, to outsiders looking in to see, here's this general who has been responsible. He always worked in the shadows for a long time, and he was responsible for kind of special operations abroad. And yet he was really, within Iran, even people who disliked the regime very much appreciated Qasem Soleimani, because they saw him as keeping Iran safe in a very unstable region and keeping the bombs, from going off within Iran and fighting Iran's enemy, including Islamic State, and for many that also includes the U.S. outside of Iran. So he is a kind of unifying figure. This is really sort of a rally around the flag moment for the Iranians.
Yeah, it's interesting you note that Iranians saw Soleimani as a figure who kept their country safe, when we see President Trump saying that the targeted killing of the general was meant to keep the region safe via that move. I mean, what have the last few days told us about whether that's the case?
Yes, I mean, it's clearly it's early days, and we'll have to see how Iran, in fact, retaliates. The Supreme Leader has said there will be severe retaliation, but we don't know how they will calibrate that. Most people believe that neither Iran nor the US want an all-out war, the costs for both would be quite large. Within that, so what can we see in the last couple of days? Well, nothing that really tells us that, when Donald Trump said that this will make the region more safe, nothing that suggests that. It's really rather inconceivable there won't be some kind of retaliation from the Iranians, which will then, as the U.S. president has said, produce a U.S. retaliation. Within Iraq, Parliament has voted in a not definitive vote, but nevertheless it has indicated that it wants to end the request for assistance to the U.S. So that's a kind of a boon for the Iranians. Can't really be seen as a sort of stabilizing factor because Iraq wanted the Americans there to kind of balance Iranian power in Iraq. The early indications are not great.
Well, one thing the Iranians have said is that they no longer feel bound by the limits of the 2015 nuclear deal. In our last less than a minute here, could that be seen as a form of retaliation, or does that just put Iran on a path that it had already been on?
It is a form of retaliation. They've gone that extra step. Yes, they were on that path, triggered in, one has to say in fairness, by the decision of the U.S. to withdraw from the treaty. But yes, they haven't gone all the way. They are still maintaining that part of the agreement that allows international inspectors in. But otherwise, they've now abandoned the treaty. It's more or less dead.
Bloomberg senior reporter for international affairs, Mark Champion, joining us from our London bureau. Mark, thanks again for being with us here this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. Karen?
Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Borden Dairy Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the District of Delaware. Borden is looking to cut its debt load through a voluntary reorganization. A federal government lawsuit against apparel importer Harvick International will go forward. The suit seeks more than $400,000 in civil penalties for alleged violations of import quotas. And a preliminary proxy statement shows that Apple General Counsel Catherine Adams' total compensation topped $25 million in 2019.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal development we're watching, an appellate court ruling that lowers the bar for bringing insider trading cases. The decision came in the appeal of insider convictions of David Blazak, the so-called king of political intelligence. Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with former federal prosecutor and current Wayne State University law professor Peter Henning.
Blazak was convicted along with his source and two hedge fund partners who traded on the tips in a trial that lasted a month. What was the key legal issue?
Well, what was interesting in that trial was that the government accused the defendants of stealing government property, that is, valuable information that the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services had. And so that was one of the key issues in the case. And in addition, they were also convicted of wire fraud, and under a new federal statute that was adopted as part of the Dodd-Frank Act, Section 1348, which makes it a crime to engage in securities fraud. And so they were convicted of those three crimes. It turns out they were acquitted of violating Section 10B and Rule 10b-5, the basic insider trading prohibitions. And so what happened in the appeal was that Judge Sullivan wrote that you don't have to show that there was any benefit to the source of the tip in order to be convicted under Section 1348, so gave a very, very broad interpretation of that particular provision, which is going to be very helpful to the Department of Justice in the future.
So does that basically mean that prosecutors can bring criminal charges and don't have to show personal benefit, but if they bring civil charges, they have to show personal benefit, so the bar is lower in a criminal prosecution than a civil?
That's in fact the case now. Judge Sullivan's opinion says that you don't have to show that there was any kind of personal benefit between the tipper and the tippee under Section 1348, the securities fraud provision. The SEC is going to have to live with proving personal benefit and some type of quid pro quo, but federal prosecutors now, at least under Judge Sullivan's opinion, don't have to prove that. And so all they need to really show going forward is that you traded on confidential information.
And that's Wayne State University law professor Peter Henning speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. Futures this morning are lower. Havens are climbing. COMEX gold is up 1.8% right now, up $27.10 at $15.79.50 an ounce. NYMEX crude oil jumping up 1.1% or 66 cents at $63.71. S&P futures are down 19 points this morning. Dow futures down 169. NASDAQ futures down about 63. The 10-year Treasury up 1/32nd, yield 1.78%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value, with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 280-gram Tesco stone-baked pepperoni pizza, now half price from £3.50 to just £1.75. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 14th of January.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium,
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats.
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, January 6, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks fall as tensions with Iran escalate.
Tehran threatens retaliation and abandons the 2015 nuclear accord.
Iraq seeks to remove American troops and the U.S. suspends its fight against Islamic State.
Oil gains, the yen strengthens, and gold hits a 6-year high.
Lawmakers and politicians react to the Iran airstrike, plus Harvey Weinstein goes on trial this week for sex crimes. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. NFL's wild card weekend ended with the NFC and road wins by the Vikings and Seahawks. NBA, the Knicks lost to the Clippers.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are following global stocks lower as the fallout continues from the U.S. airstrikes that killed a powerful Iranian general. More on that in a moment, but first we're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 19 points. Dow futures down 174. NASDAQ futures down 62. The DAX in Germany is down 1.6%. CAC in Paris down 1.2%. And the FTSE 100 down 1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan dropped 1.9%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.8%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.78%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. COMEX gold is up 1.8% or $27.20 at $15.79.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1197 against the dollar and the yen 108.01. Nathan.
Karen, tensions between the U.S. and Iran are getting hotter. Tehran is threatening retaliation over the killing of its top general, and it's also abandoning limits on uranium enrichment. Meanwhile, in Iraq, the government is looking to expel American forces. We get the very latest now from Bloomberg International editor Jody Schneider.
We have calls to reprisal from the region that there be attacks on U.S. assets and U.S. service people in the region. We've seen the Iraq parliament actually vote that the U.S. remove its troops from that country. And on the Iranian side, we've heard from them in terms of the Iran nuclear agreement, the 2015 agreement, that they will no longer abide by a key part of that agreement, which is that they no longer enrich uranium.
The killing of Qasem Soleimani is appearing to unite Iranians, with thousands turning out to mourn the general over the weekend.
As Iran threatens retaliation and Iraq seeks the removal of U.S. troops, President Trump is issuing threats of his own to both nations. Here with details is Bloomberg's Derek Walbank.
Donald Trump put it in very stark terms that if Iran does anything, the U.S. will retaliate. He said he reserves the right to retaliate disproportionately. The other one that adds new risk that we hadn't necessarily seen before is following the Iraq vote. President Trump threatened to sanction the U.S. ally Iraq if they kicked out U.S. forces and did not reimburse for costs spent on base construction, which is billions of U.S. dollars, billions plural of U.S. dollars.
The U.S.-led fight against Islamic State is being suspended in Iraq as forces instead focus on protecting bases that have recently come under attack.
The tension in the region has oil prices spiking again today. Bob McNally is president of Rapidan Energy Advisors.
Our assessment is that the odds of an overt U.S. military conflict with Iran went from about 5% to about 25%. And we think crude has some more risk pricing to do. At the end of the day, we think we'll avoid a war because both President Trump and the Iranian leadership wish to do so. Neither side wants to go into a full-on military conflict.
And checking oil now, West Texas Intermediate's up 1% or 63 cents to $63.69 a barrel. Brent is up 1.3% at $69.50.
Meantime, in Europe, leaders are scrambling to work out what they can do about tensions between the U.S. and Iran. We get details now from Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek, who joins us live from London. Good morning, Sebastian.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. The U.S. killing of a top Iranian general was more than just a shock for the EU. It was a disaster. The bloc has been fighting an increasingly desperate and lonely campaign to keep the 2015 Iran nuclear accord together ever since President Trump pulled the U.S. out in 2018. The fruit of more than a decade of diplomatic efforts by France, Germany and the UK was laid to waste on Sunday when Iran said it no longer considers itself bound by its international obligations to restrict the enrichment of uranium. Leaders of the three countries issued a statement Sunday saying they urge Iran to reverse all measures inconsistent with the deal. Live in London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Sebastian. Risk-off sentiment is widespread in global markets. The move lower for equities started immediately when trading opened in Asia. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. A drive to safe havens like the yen saw the Nikkei 225 have its biggest one-day fall since early October, closing lower by almost 2%. Dollar-yen dropped to mid-107 levels intraday, bearishly breaching the 108 to 110 range that it's held since mid-October. Elsewhere, a positive read on China's economy with the Taishin December Services PMI holding up in expansionary territory wasn't enough to boost sentiment on the mainland. The CSI 300 closed down 0.4%. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. The questions for markets now is what comes next? Kokyu Agboola is head of flow strategy at Societe Generale.
If you look at the track record in sort of 2019 when it came to North Korea and the crisis, we have learned that reacting too quickly to this sort of geopolitical risk could be quite damaging for portfolio investment returns. So I think Safe Haven have reacted the way they should, but I think that it will be very difficult to see a complete sort of debacle in terms of war war simply because Iran will have a lot more to lose. And therefore, I think there might be more subtle retaliation over a longer period of time as opposed to a tit-for-tat type situation.
And the tension has gold hitting the highest level since 2013, with spot gold trading at $1,577 an ounce.
Now, analysts believe Iran will retaliate, but it's less clear what form that may take. Sanam Vakil is deputy head of the Middle East at Chatham House.
It's about revenge, but it's also about setting sort of a precedent and a message to the United States that this was sort of one step too far. And here, Iran very much gets to control the narrative of how it responds. And I think Iran has to escalate because it's the only way out of the sanctions-based maximum pressure policy and sort of crisis that it is already undergoing with the Trump administration.
And more on the tensions coming up. This is Bloomberg. At 6:07 on Wall Street, we bring in Michael Barr with the latest world and national news. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Lawmakers and politicians are reacting to the U.S. drone strike against top Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani. At a campaign event in Davenport, Iowa last night, former Vice President Joe Biden reacted to President Trump's Twitter activity over the weekend, including his, quote, official notice to Congress that the U.S. will take retaliatory action if Iran strikes any American person, interest, or target.
No president has the right to take the nation to war without the informed consent and authority coming from the United States Congress. But he thinks he can do it by having formally told the world in a tweet.
Fellow Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren questioned the timing of the airstrike, saying people wonder whether it was a bid to distract from President Trump's impeachment. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham defended the drone strike in Iraq, saying, "I'm glad he's dead, and I'm glad we finally got a president who understands Iran is the cancer of the Middle East, and they must change the status quo." Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he has spoken with President Trump and leaders of France and Germany about the U.S. airstrike that killed Soleimani. Johnson says we will not lament his death, but calls for de-escalation from all sides. That was echoed by British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab speaking to Sky News.
We want to see Iranian behaviour improve, and there is an opportunity, if the leadership in Tehran take it, to actually move from the heightened tensions to a more positive track.
5 people were killed and at least 60 more injured during a deadly pileup on the Pennsylvania highway Sunday morning outside of Pittsburgh. Multiple vehicles were involved in the crash, including 3 tractor-trailers and a tour bus out of Rockaway, New Jersey. NTSB member Jennifer Hamady.
There are reports that the bus was heading from Rockaway, New Jersey to Cincinnati, Ohio, but that is information that we need to confirm.
Hamady would not say if snow was a factor in the crash. 3 of the victims killed were from New York City, and 2 others were UPS employees from Pennsylvania. The New York victims who died included Jeremy Vasquez from Brooklyn, who was just 9 years old. Disgraced movie producer Harvey Weinstein goes on trial this week in New York, where he is charged with 5 sex crimes. He has pleaded not guilty. The World War I epic 1917 won the Golden Globe for Best Drama last night. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. Count up to 6:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, a wild card weekend. 3 wins by road teams. That also happened last year. 2 games went to overtime, and the 2 6 seeds both won by beating Tom Brady and Drew Brees, the 2 40-year-old quarterbacks who have the 2 most touchdown passes in NFL history. Brees and the Saints came from 10 down to force overtime, but the Vikings won the coin flip. Long Kirk Cousins pass to Adam Thielen set him up for the game winner.
Cousins from the gun. 3rd and goal at the 4. Kirk Cousins play action, floats it for Rudolph, back left corner of the end zone, leaping 2-hand grab for the touchdown. And the Minnesota Vikings have shocked the New Orleans Saints in overtime, 26-20.
Westwood One had a 3rd year in a row. New Orleans season has ended on the final play of the game. The other NFC game saw Seattle win 17-9 in Philadelphia. The Eagles battled through injuries. Most of Carson Wentz's weapons got hurt, and then Wentz got hurt in the first quarter, a head injury in his first career playoff game. He had been out the previous 2 Eagles postseason runs, including that Super Bowl run 2 years ago. His coach is Doug Peterson.
I'm disappointed, for him.
because I wanted this for him, obviously, and I think a lot of his teammates did too, and the organization did. I mean, he's battled through a lot, but we'll learn from it. We'll move on.
And the 4 wild card winners move on to the divisional round next weekend. Knicks in L.A. scored 45 points in the first quarter, but gave up 47 in the second. They fell short against the Clippers, 135-132. St. John's fell to 0-2 in the Big East. Red Storm beaten by Xavier, 75-67. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are lower by 19 points now. Dow futures down 181. NASDAQ futures a loss of 64 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Robots have replaced thousands of routine jobs on Wall Street. Now they're coming for higher-ups. That's the contention of Marcos Lopez de Prado, a Cornell University professor and the former head of machine learning at AQR Capital. We have seen the changes because of machine learning in finance, but how much faster could these changes occur, and what's driving this wave of change?
Well, what is driving is data. Today we have data sets that were not available 2-3 years ago, and the only way to model these data sets is utilizing these complex techniques.
When it comes to that congressional hearing that we had recently, of course, the lawmakers were very concerned about bias, whether it's racial bias and so forth in these artificial intelligence mechanisms. Is that easy to fix?
Not easy to fix, but definitely it is easier to identify bias in an algorithm than in a human. A human will make a few hundred of decisions in a year, and to identify whether a human is biased is very difficult. However, we can conduct millions of randomized control experiments on an algorithm to identify whether there is bias. And when there is bias, we can correct it. And an algorithm that was biased before this correction will not be biased afterwards. I'm much more concerned with bias in human decisions.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and futures are falling with S&P futures down 20 points, Dow futures down 188, NASDAQ futures down 67, the DAX in Germany's down 1.7%, 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.25%, it's at $63.86 a barrel, and COMEX gold is up 1.8% at $15.8020 an ounce. And Boeing is mulling to raise more debt to improve finances as costs related to the grounding of its 737 MAX are raising. That from Dow Jones, which cited unidentified people familiar with the matter. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Trump insisted that Iranian cultural sites were fair game for the U.S. military, dismissing concerns within his own administration that doing so could constitute a war crime under international law. He also warned Iraq that he would levy punishing sanctions if it expelled American troops in retaliation for a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad that killed a top Iranian official. In the NFL's wild card playoffs, the Seahawks beat the Eagles to advance. The Vikings eliminated the Saints in overtime. In the NBA, the Knicks lost. In the NHL, the Capitals won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's coming up to 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Now let's get you set up for the trading day and week ahead. Joining us from New York, Joe Weisenthal, head of the Americas News Desk for Bloomberg News. In London, we're joined by executive editor Heather Harris, and in Beijing, we're pleased to have managing editor Emma O'Brien. We'll begin with you, Joe, as we continue to watch this broad market sell-off, a run to safety with tensions between the U.S. and Iran showing little sign of let-up this morning.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And of course, as everyone recalls, we had a very fast close to 2019 in terms of how much markets had run up. We made 20 new highs in the final 2 months of the year, according to Goldman Sachs. First day this year back was also good, but not surprisingly, in light of the geopolitical issues that have arisen, which almost nobody was talking about, at least in the market's perspective, a day earlier, we continue to see this pullback, classic risk-off move, stocks going down, and oil breaking out. Brent oil hitting near 70, and gold really on a tear to start the year.
Yeah, like Joe says, Heather, it is what everyone is talking about, including America's European allies. They are scrambling to figure out how they should react to this.
That's right. Their lack of power, really, in global foreign policy has been laid bare by what happened in Iran to begin with. They were blindsided by the U.S. airstrike in the first place, which left them scrambling for a response. And indeed, it took more than 48 hours for the leaders of Germany, France, and the UK to even formulate a response. And if you look at that release, they don't even mention Trump or the U.S. or their role in any of this. So it's a really tough start for the new President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Yeah, and considering the start to the new year that we had, Emma O'Brien, it seemed so positive with the Phase 1 trade deal looking like it was going to be signed. I guess that's still on track here.
Yeah, it seems as though the Phase 1 deal is within reach, with China apparently sending a delegation to DC on January 15th to do that. Xi Jinping's right-hand man on trade and the economy, Liu He, will be there, but not Xi himself. Apparently China had to hustle after Trump, I guess unilaterally, tweeted the date and said he'd be willing to sign a deal even if Xi wasn't available. I mean, it is worth remembering that the Phase 1 agreement doesn't include some of the thornier issues the US has with China over trade, like intellectual property, forced tech transfers. So this isn't, as you say, over yet.
Yeah, another scramble, it seems. Joe Weisenthal, back to you. I wonder if we'll see risk assets come back on the table when we get the December jobs report at the end of the week.
Yeah, that's really going to be the big event of the week, that non-farm payrolls report on Friday. I think the context in which people should think about it is a lot of the optimism that we saw in stocks, especially in the second half of the year, was sort of predicated on this idea that we would see an economic rebound, partly maybe due to follow-on from the 3 Fed rate cuts, partly due to confidence instilled by the trade deal. Now we actually need to see the data. We need to see strong economic data. We need to see a pickup in that data feeding into earnings. So a number like the December jobs report is going to be a big thing to watch.
All right, so the December jobs report might be the big eco event of the week. Emma O'Brien, I got to think, though, that former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn is going to try to make his news conference a pretty big event himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting one. The fallen auto titan is preparing for what looks like will be quite the media blitz this week. And this comes as more details about his pretty desperate escape start to come out. We had Japanese media reporting today, and this doesn't really reflect that well on Japan itself, that Ghosn took a bullet train, a cab, and then stayed in a hotel near the Osaka airport where he was smuggled out of. He did board the plane inside a box, which was apparently too large to go through the X-ray scanner at the airport. And so now, of course, questions being asked about Japan's approach to airport security. Japan's government has been very reticent to talk about this, obviously been on holidays around the New Year period for quite some time, and only back today when we got some quite tight-lipped commentary from the Justice Minister saying they will review how he got out of the country. Yeah, an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinating for sure. Heather Harris, another big event happening in London where you are. The Brexit deal debate begins once again.
Yes, that's right. And this time, I'm afraid it won't be the kind of nail-biters that we had this time last year about Brexit, because Boris Johnson got his 80-seat majority in the House of Parliament, and there's really no reason to think this won't be anything more than a formality, and that the UK will politically be moving away from the European Union at the end of January. Then, of course, we have that important trade deal to negotiate with them.
Heather Harris, Bloomberg News executive editor, with us from London this morning. Also, thanks to Bloomberg managing editor Emma O'Brien in Beijing, along with Joe Weisenthal, head of the Americas News Desk for Bloomberg News, joining us from New York. As we continue to watch the market sell off this morning, S&P futures are lower by 19 points at the moment. Dow futures down 178. NASDAQ futures lower by 63 points. 10-year Treasury yield just shy of 1.78%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stock futures point to a drop at the open, with investors on edge about rising tensions in the Middle East. The major averages pulled back on Friday, with the Dow down 234 points. We're also seeing crude oil climbing again today. It's back up to almost $64 a barrel. Dow Jones is reporting that Boeing is considering plans to raise more debt to boost its finances, strained by the grounding of its 737 MAX. The aerospace giant is not running out of cash, but costs associated with the MAX crisis have been rising. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal says federal aviation regulators are considering requiring pilots to complete simulator training before they can operate the MAX jets again, following 2 fatal crashes of the model. Japanese shoemakers Asics and Mizuno jumped lower today after a major racing event showed more runners opting for Nikes. One analyst says that more collegiate athletes were seen wearing Nike shoes at an annual relay televised nationally in Japan. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Fulham, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a swimming pool, and our expert team will help you get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with B.
Bike.
Nope. Banana tree.
Oh, of course. We must have missed it.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Drive carbon neutral by filling up and using Shell Go Plus today. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value, with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 500-gram tub of Anchor Salted Spreadable from £3.50 to just £2. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 14th of January.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are tumbling around the world as the fallout continues from the U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. We have several new developments covering threats of retaliation, Iran's nuclear ambitions, and U.S. troops in Iraq. And here with details is Bloomberg Daybreak editor Brian Fowler.
We'll start with Tehran declaring that it will not abide by any limits on its uranium enrichment operations. And then we've got Iraq's parliament voting to oust U.S. forces from that country. And then we've got President Donald Trump. He warns Iran of, quote, disproportionate U.S. retaliation for any sort of military action on U.S. forces by Iran. And then he's also threatening heavy sanctions on Iraq if indeed American troops are expelled, unless Baghdad agrees to repay billions of dollars in military-based construction costs.
The U.S.-led fight against Islamic State is being suspended in Iraq as forces instead focus on protecting bases that have recently come under attack.
The leaders in Europe, meantime, are calling for meetings to work out what they can do about the situation with Iran. We get more from Bloomberg International editor Jody Schneider.
France, Germany, the UK are basically condemning Iran, calling for that emergency NATO meeting, trying to calm tensions, asking that there be calm, that there not be tit-for-tat reprisals.
Tensions in the region has oil spiking again today. And here are details as Bloomberg's Stephen Stapinski.
More tension in the Middle East could do something to supply that could cut off potentially shipments from the Strait of Hormuz. So we're currently in a situation where folks are very worried whether or not they're going to be able to get this risk off at the moment. So they're doing what they're doing, and this is causing prices to rise.
Checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil is up 1.2% or 77 cents at $63.82 a barrel. Brent also rising up 1.5%, up $1.02 to $69.62. Futures this morning are falling. S&P futures are down 18 points. Dow futures down 173. NASDAQ futures down 61. The DAX in Germany is down 1.6%. CAC in Paris down 1.1%. And the FTSE 100 is down 0.9%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 1.9%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.8%. The 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year at 1.53%. COMEX gold up 1.8%, up $27.20 at $15.79.60 an ounce. The euro 1.1206 against the dollar, and the yen at 108.08. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. 6:33 now on Wall Street. Michael Barr has a check of what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Lawmakers say President Trump's tweets saying he'll target 52 Iranian sites are not helping after the killing of Iranian General Soleimani by a U.S. drone strike in Iraq. Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner spoke on NBC's Meet the Press.
I'm not sure the president, by his kind of taunting tweets, is necessarily trying to de-escalate. I'm not sure how we will be seen as both stronger and smarter if we have our Iraqi allies asking us to leave, if our NATO allies don't feel like they're going to be informed before we take this kind of action, and frankly, if the people in the region that were against the Iranian regime all across the region are now rallying against America.
Meet the Press can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox defended the U.S. drone strike in Iraq that killed Iran's top general.
He died not because of the color of his skin or because of his ethnic origins. He died because of the content of his character. He was an evil man. He was a terrorist leader. He had American blood on his hands, and I am glad he's dead, and I'm glad we finally got a president who understands that Iran is the cancer of the Mideast, and they must change.
Former Vice President Joe Biden, reacting to the president's Twitter activity over the weekend, says Trump threatened to go after Iran in a tweet. Officials say 5 people were killed and dozens hospitalized in a Sunday morning crash on the Pennsylvania Turnpike outside of Pittsburgh. The crash involved a bus out of Rockaway, New Jersey, 3 tractor trailers, and a passenger car. This man was a passenger on the bus.
When we started tumbling, it was about 2 to 3 seconds where it was just like 0 G.
Of the 5 people killed, 3 were from New York City, including a 9-year-old girl from Brooklyn. The bus was said to be heading from New York's Chinatown to Ohio. Harvey Weinstein is expected to be in a New York court as his lawyers and a judge handle the final preparation for his trial on charges of rape and sexual assault. Jury selection is scheduled to start this week. The disgraced movie mogul faces allegations that he raped one woman in a Manhattan hotel room in 2013 and performed a forcible sex act on a different woman in 2006. Weinstein, who is 67, has pleaded not guilty and says any sexual activity was consensual. If he is convicted of the most serious charges against him, he faces a mandatory life sentence. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. Coming up to 6:36 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, wildcard weekend saw the 2 6 seeds both advance about 30 hours after Tennessee upset Tom Brady in New England. Minnesota upset Drew Brees in New Orleans. 26-20 in overtime. Kirk Cousins, who's made a lot of money in the NFL, but who had never before won a playoff game, threw a game-winning TD pass to Kyle Rudolph, the second overtime game of the weekend. And so Minnesota advances to play at San Francisco. In Philadelphia, Seattle never trailed.
Four-man rush, receiver in motion, snap, spin, fake handoff, dropping back 5, winding up, long pass down the middle. He's got Metcalf, lunging catch to the 15, down the middle the 10, got to the 5, tumbles in, touchdown Seattle. What a play! What a throw! 53-yard touchdown pass. The rookie Metcalf gets it, and the Seahawks go up 16-6.
Westwood won the call. Seahawks won 17-9. The Eagles had fourth quarter chances to tie. Twice stopped on fourth down. They were quarterbacked by veteran Josh McCown. Made his postseason debut at the age of 40. Carson Wentz, injured in Philly's last 2 playoff runs, made his postseason debut, but left in the first quarter with a head injury in Seattle. Now plays at Green Bay on Sunday. Knicks lost a wild one in L.A. to the Clippers, 135-132. Knicks were up by 16 and then down by 15. The late rally fell short. They got a career-high 38 points from Marcus Morris. College hoops, St. John's fell at Xavier 75-67. Fordham lost at Rose Hill to LaSalle. In the MAC, Manhattan won at Niagara. Monmouth beat Iona. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. Coming up this week, we hear from several Federal Reserve officials ahead of Friday's U.S. jobs report. Here with details is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Thursday, Fed Vice Chairman Richard Clarida will be speaking in New York, and New York Fed President John Williams will be discussing the future of inflation targeting at the Bank of England in London. St. Louis Fed President Jim Bullard speaks to Wisconsin bankers, and Chicago Fed President Charlie Evans will be discussing the economic outlook in Milwaukee. Those remarks will come ahead of Friday's jobs report, which is projected to show non-farm payrolls rose about 170,000 in December, with the unemployment rate forecast to hold steady at a 50-year low of 3.5%. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. 6:38 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
I'm Liam Denning, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. The assassination of Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani is the latest escalation in the country's ongoing confrontation with the U.S. Despite Soleimani's high profile, oil prices rose only a little in response. Perhaps the relatively quick recovery from September's attacks on Saudi Arabian oil facilities has soothed nerves in the market. Undoubtedly, the past decade's surge in U.S. shale production has. That looks complacent. Besides an almost inevitable Iranian response, the bigger point to draw from this is America's ongoing shift from regional security guarantor to geopolitical wildcard. Bolstered by a sense of energy dominance, the U.S. relationship with the world, the Middle East included, is changing. This latest explosion is far from being business as usual. I'm Liam Denning. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN GO on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN GO. It's 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
Some renewable energy companies in Europe are riding a new wave in the quest to grow the low-carbon power supply. A wind turbine floating off the coast of northern Portugal has started transmitting electricity to the power grid, creating a new platform that could vastly increase the potential for offshore wind power. The wind-floated Atlantic pilot project is using the largest turbines in the world for floating power. 3 turbines with a combined 25-megawatt capacity will eventually be connected, helping to advance the economic viability of floating wind farms in the increasingly competitive market for renewable energy. Floating turbines could have a built-in advantage to traditional traditional offshore platforms because they can be placed more readily. Machines can operate in waters much deeper than the relatively shallow seabeds required to anchor stationary masts. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
All right, Bob, thank you. S&P futures are lower right now by 19 points. Dow futures down 185. NASDAQ futures are lower by almost 64 points. 10 years up 2/32, yield 1.78%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.52%. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE SIPC.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life, joined by Kerry Cole. Kerry, what inspired you to become a runner?
The only run I do is the school run. My husband and kids, Liam, stop that, are walking this 5K with me. Claire, put your shoes back on to beat cancer.
And what would you say to others thinking of following in your footsteps?
I'd say, put that down. I'd say it's a great day out, even if your family drives you mad.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot,
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today to a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
President Trump insists that Iranian cultural sites are fair game for the U.S. military, dismissing concerns within his administration that attacking them is a war crime under international law. He's also warning Iraq that he will hit them with punishing sanctions if they expel American troops. 25 people now known dead in the fires ravaging an area twice the size of Maryland in eastern Australia. Rain and cooler temperatures right now actually making it challenging for fire crews to complete strategic burns as they try to get ready for the higher temperatures and winds that are coming back. Andrew Stevens is in Canberra.
At one stage, there was one fire which was about the size of Manhattan, and it was all being generated at the weekend by extraordinarily hot temperatures. A suburb of Sydney hit 120 degrees.
Kenyan police have arrested 3 men who tried to force their way into a British Army training camp. It occurred the same day that Al-Shabaab extremists attacked a military base and killed 3 Americans. Stock futures are showing heavy losses this hour. I'm Michael Toscano.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are falling this morning. We go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are under pressure again today with Dow futures 187 points. S&P's dropped 20 and NASDAQ futures decline by 65. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.78%. Gold is at its highest level since 2013. And WTI crude futures are up 1.1%. Japan fell 1.2% overnight, while European markets are also under pressure, led by 1.7% declines in Germany. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 9:45, market U.S. services PMI. And in other news, Boeing is considering raising more debt, cutting capex and R&D, and Apple's price target was raised to $350 over at Needham. Wrapping things up, Bank of America was raised to overweight at Barclays. Citigroup cut to hold at Deutsche Bank. State Street was raised to buy at Goldman Sachs, and Travelers cut to underweight over at Wells Fargo. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over here at Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, France's finance minister says the current tensions in the Middle East could affect global economic growth and reinvigorate Islamic State group extremists. He said today on France Interradio that the instability will increase the terrorist threat over France and Europe. Al-Shabaab extremists overran a key military base used by U.S. counter-terror forces in Kenya before dawn Sunday. 3 American Department of Defense personnel were killed and several U.S. aircraft and vehicles were destroyed before the extremists were repelled. In the NFL's wildcard playoffs, the Seahawks beat the Eagles 17-9 to advance to the divisional round. The Vikings eliminated the Saints in overtime, 26-20. In the NBA, the Knicks lost. In the NHL, the Capitals won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. We're at 6:49 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C., where escalating tensions with Iran are front and center following the killing of General Qasem Soleimani last week. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo went on every Sunday morning political show to defend President Trump's decision, including ABC's This Week.
The president made the right decision to stop Qasem Soleimani from terror campaign that he'd been engaged in against America not only 5 years ago and 10 years ago, but on December 27th when American was killed by Kataib Hezbollah at the orchestrated direction of Qasem Soleimani, and to prevent the future plans that the terrorist Soleimani had in front of him.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was on the same program.
I really worry that the actions the president took will get us into what he calls another endless war in the Middle East. He promised we wouldn't have that, and I think we're closer to that now because of his actions.
Pompeo was asked on Fox News Sunday about the imminent threat he says Soleimani posed.
There's things we simply cannot make public about what it is we knew at that time and what, in fact, we know today about the continuing activity. I think General Milley got it right when he said we would have been culpably negligent had we not gone after Soleimani when we had the opportunity.
Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen also on Fox News Sunday.
They have an obligation to present the evidence. They did not notify the Gang of Eight. The one opportunity they had just 2 days ago to brief senior staff at the top secret level, they provided no evidence to support their claim of an imminent threat.
Now Iraq's parliament has voted for U.S. and coalition troops to leave the country. On CBS's Face the Nation, Pompeo was asked whether the U.S. would comply with that request.
It is the United States that is prepared to help the Iraqi people get what it is they deserve and continue our mission there to take down terrorism from ISIS and others in the region that is in defense of the Iraqi people and is good for America, too.
And on NBC's Meet the Press, Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren questioned the timing of the strike as President Trump faces an impeachment trial.
I think people are starting to ask, why now did he do this? Why not delay? And why this one is so dangerous is that he is truly taking us right to the edge of war.
And that is some of the conversation from the political shows you hear every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio. NBC's Meet the Press at 11 a.m. Wall Street time, Fox News Sunday at noon, ABC's This Week at 1 p.m., and Face the Nation from CBS at 2 o'clock. For more on all this, we're joined by Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. Good morning, Greg. I wonder what you make of the Trump administration's rationale for making this move. Has it made enough of a defense for the killing of General Soleimani?
Well, good morning, Nathan. It seemed as the weekend progressed that more and more people were asking that very question. Was there evidence to show that we had to do it right now? Elizabeth Warren's view, of course, is that it was designed to obscure the impeachment trial. That may be a bit too much to bear, but there are questions. Just like there were questions with the Iraq War. Was there sufficient evidence?
So is there going to be more pressure now on the Trump administration to provide the evidence it says it has that there was this imminent attack, this imminent threat that General Soleimani posed?
Absolutely, and I think the key player is going to be Mark Warner, a moderate Democrat from Virginia, who said over the weekend that there apparently was evidence indicating more attacks on Americans. If Warner's view prevails, and he has a lot of credibility, that could diffuse this crisis for, at least part of the crisis, for the White House.
Now, the Secretary of State says the U.S. is committed to de-escalation with Iran. At the same time, we continue to hear and see on Twitter President Trump threatening further attacks if Iran doesn't change its behavior, saying that there are 52 sites, one for each hostage taken in 1979, including cultural sites. What do you make of this ramped-up rhetoric?
I think a lot of Republicans over the weekend were distressed to hear the president talk about going after cultural sites. I think that was unnecessarily provocative in an already, red-hot situation. So I think he may tone that down a bit. But, you've got to refocus on the main story coming up over the next several days. There will be retaliation, whether it's cyber warfare or in the Strait of Hormuz or against oil producers in the Middle East. There will be retaliation.
We spoke earlier with our international affairs senior reporter, Mark Champion, noting that Iran is already saying it's not going to comply with the limits of the 2015 nuclear deal in response to this. Could that be seen as a form of retaliation?
It sure could be, and I think there will be more. You know, at some point, Nathan, maybe by summer things will cool off. Maybe an intermediary like France will try to broker an uneasy settlement. But my gut feeling is that this is going to get worse before it gets better.
When you talk about worse before it gets better, how do you see this playing out over the next several months? Do you see a hot conflict in the Middle East shaping up here?
Potentially, yes. And I see an increasing conflict in the U.S. I think that Bernie Sanders is the clear beneficiary. He will be the anti-war candidate. He already was doing well in New Hampshire and Iowa. He's got plenty of money. So I think in addition to dividing the world, this story is going to divide the U.S. political situation even more than impeachment.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about how this could reshape the Democratic presidential race. Do you see that playing out already?
Yeah, I think that the rhetoric from Sanders was quite powerful. All the others sort of waffled and weaseled a bit, even Elizabeth Warren. I think they all agree that this was a bad guy who needed to be taken out. But the rhetoric from Sanders really was quite strong, and I think that the left wing of the party, which is so dominant in these early races, is going to coalesce around him.
And do you see that potentially reshaping how this could play out in a general election race? Do you see the president's base rallying around him as this goes forward?
Well, he's very good at spinning stories, and I'm sure he'll spin this to his advantage, but you would have to say that a key feature of the Trump philosophy, which is to disengage, which is to be more isolationist, has been violated. So now Trump has flipped entirely. So he's going to have to convince his base that it is worth our while to get back involved in the Middle East, which he never wanted to do.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you as well about what this says about the president's foreign policy. Do you see an overarching strategy at play behind the killing of Soleimani?
Not really. I think he lacks a lot of key advisors. An awful lot of really good people. General Mattis, for example, have left. And he has the B team around him. He's very reactive. He does things quite impulsively. That doesn't mean we can't succeed and that this shouldn't have happened. But I do worry that Trump runs the risk of inflaming this rather than cooling it off.
No, this certainly won't be the last we talk about this for sure. Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist, AGF Investments. Good to get your insights on this Monday morning here on Bloomberg Daybreak. Read more at Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg Terminal. Listen to Bloomberg Radio in Washington at Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Karen.
All right, thanks, Nathan. And futures are lower this morning with S&P futures down about 19 points. Dow futures down 177 and NASDAQ futures down 62. The DAX in Germany down 1.6%. The CAC in Paris is down 1.1%, and the FTSE 100 is down 1%. 10-year Treasury up 2/32, yield 1.77%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.25% or 79 cents at $63.84 a barrel. And Bloomberg surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class, skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
It's great being with Eon. Right now, they're offering their customers the chance to win big thanks to an exclusive prize draw, with the top prize being a £5,000 holiday. Where to? Well, you choose the destination and they do the rest. Another winter warmer from Eon. To check out all the great prizes on offer, for the full terms and conditions, and to enter, go to eonenergy.com/win by the 30th of January.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
This is like a puzzle. Can you make a call given the data?
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In these countries, we're still seeing people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of
these big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, geopolitical risk gripping markets, the world waiting for Iran's next move, fueling a rally in haven assets, driving gold to the highest levels in more than 6 years, and helping oil continue its advance. Brent crude briefly through $70 a barrel. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, hello Monday. Here is your price action. Equity futures rolling over, down 0.6% on the S&P 500. Muted risk aversion elsewhere. Yields come in just a single basis point on a 10-year Treasury to 1.779%. And in foreign exchange, the dollar weaker. It's the bulk of G10. The euro advances 0.4%. That's a snapshot of some of the market action this morning. Your top story, President Trump warning of disproportionate retaliation if Iran responds to Soleimani's killing by attacking an American or U.S. facility. Iran in the process of mourning the dead general as the world waits for the country's next move. What a morning to have Tom Keene at Eurasia Group headquarters as they unveil their top risks for 2020. Good morning to you, Tom.
John Farrell, good morning to you. It has been an extraordinary Friday into the weekend, and with the news flow moving in real time. This is a real treat. We welcome all of you worldwide and across the nation to a conversation with Ian Bremmer. Let me explain here right now. Out of Tulane, Dr. Bremmer has built a franchise over a decade with Eurasia Group, and what he's done, like any lead singer running a good band, is be sure everybody in the band is better than him. And he has put together an outstanding team at Eurasia Group over the years of true experts. So let's dive in with Ian Bremmer with the top risks of 2020. You had to rip up the script of your 2020 risks here and rewrite it on Friday and Saturday. Where does Iraq, Iran, all of these tensions fit in to the global risks of this year?
Well, we had to include it, certainly. But let's be clear. When you look at the big trends out there, 2020 is a tipping point. And that's true because an economy that's been growing robustly, 2008 financial crisis, is now starting to get softer. A geopolitical recession is in serious capacity right now, and that the alignment between the United States and its allies is vastly weaker than it used to be. Globalization, which is the one thing that had driven so much of the good news, is now taking a significant step backwards as the United States and China decouples from each other on the technology front. Those three things coming together is, frankly, an unprecedented set of trends over the course of the last few generations. And it does mean that even though we don't believe that Iran war is going to suddenly lead to regional confrontation or World War III, we do believe that there is experience globally is so much less.
You sat down today, Ian, and you said to me, I just want to get away from the hysteria. I've been doing that all weekend. You know, it's like 1914, et cetera. Neil Ferguson's wonderful essay in the Times of London, Tom Friedman writing, and others about some of the historical perspective. If we're to get away from the hysteria and get towards clear thinking on these immediate matters, what is the clear thinking as we look at Tehran, Baghdad, and Washington?
Clear thinking is that the United States is likely to be forced out of Iraq, its troop presence, which Trump didn't want to have to begin with, but nonetheless not because of the United States, because of Iran, and because the Shia, who are the majority in Iraq, are going to turn very significantly against the United States following the series of bombings that you've seen without any permission from the Iraqi government, invasion of their sovereignty. Having said that, the power asymmetry between the United States and Iran is massive. If the Iranians were to actually engage in serious strikes against Americans in the region, they do risk their regime. And that's very different from the risk they thought they were taking when they went after a U.S. base in the last week, or when they went after the U.S. embassy in terms of the recent demonstrations, violence, and occupation. So there now is a level of deterrence. Trump is certainly enormously unpredictable, not very experienced leader from a foreign policy perspective. That's different from saying that our expectation is U.S.-Iran war. We don't think that's going to happen.
There's so many ways to go here, folks, and I think what I'll do is start with the immediate news flow as you wake up across the nation. And one of them is to see the House Foreign Affairs Committee say on the back end of, I believe it was a tweet, Mr. Trump, you are not a dictator. Interpret for us what Eurasia Group says about this War Powers Act, how we've come out of the fractious 70s, the legacy of Vietnam, and how Congress in the executive branch should work with each other given these tensions.
Well, should and will are two different things. Let's be very clear. I think that if Mattis, McMaster, Tillerson, Kelly, if they were still in the administration, I don't think Soleimani would have been killed.
Really? That's quite a statement.
I think the constraints on Trump, the adults in the room, are not what they were. Pompeo is very smart, but facilitates Trump, and he's about to leave office and run for Senate in Kansas in any case. So I do think that is a concern, and it's a concern that is rightly brought up by Congress. But the more important issue is that impeachment, we are about to see, is no longer functional as a political constraint on the president. That's new. In other words, we're going to have a guy running for office that will be acquitted by the Senate, and he's going to have no ability of others to say, if you take the following actions, you'll be removed from office. Only the people will be able to do that with the vote. And his efforts to manipulate and delegitimize that vote is going to be unprecedented in recent times in the U.S.
I guess my question, Dr. Bremer, is synthesize in the Democrat candidate responses to what we've seen the last 3 days, but more than that, synthesize in the United States election into your top risks of 2020.
Yeah, for the first time in 23 years, we view U.S. domestic politics as actually the singular top risk. And we don't usually think about that because the U.S. is so resilient. The political institutions are so strong. But here the concern is that we end up in an American Brexit. Not because the U.S. is leaving anything, but because the outcome of the election is seen as uncertain, is seen as contested and delegitimized. So it's not that you vote for Trump or that you vote for some Democratic candidate, but rather that whoever you vote for, half of the population believes that person should not have actually gotten the presidency. It's like Gore Bush, but without the Supreme Court concluding the outcome. And we haven't seen that since 1876 in the United States with the election of Rutherford Hayes. It's quite something to think about the world's largest economy going to have that kind of a turning point moment with our upcoming election.
Let's move to some of the other risks that we see this year. I want to touch on a few here very quickly. Sure. On China, and of course, you've been wonderful in China with your Meredith Sumter. Ian Bremer's take on the next step of China, not phase 2 in the trade talks, but almost phase Xi Trump. What's the next thing we should try to observe of these two world leaders?
We should observe that China's changed a lot more than the United States. Xi Jinping's consolidation of power, his decision to make China into an AI superpower and to decouple itself from the United States, his Belt and Road, his end of term limits, his anti-corruption campaign, those are the sea changes that we're seeing seeing. The United States has its only bipartisan consensus on foreign policy is largely on a harder line response to the Chinese.
This is great. Just because of time, I've got to get to this. You used the phrase "a long march," which of course has all that color of another time and place in China. What does the new long march of China look like?
Well, Xi Jinping uses that phrase, and that phrase is about the Chinese not being able to be hit by the United States on critical issues of national security, most importantly, their technology system. So it's building their own supply chain. It's having control of the countries that really matter. It's not needing the United States. That is decisively in opposition to everything that mattered to multinational corporations in the West for the last generation.
We see the image of Tehran. We get out our map of Iran like we got out our map of Iraq in 2003. Tehran's in a bowl. They have a lot of air pollution. We see the images of many Indian cities with horrific air pollution as well. And that gets us to climate change. It's the vogue, but it's a different vogue this year. Climate change is different now than it was 4 years ago, isn't it?
It's different because it's causing more domestic political response and backlash when the governments and the leaders aren't taking actions themselves to get to 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees. The Chinese, the Indians, the Americans, nobody is on track to make their commitments. What that means is that you're going to start to see non-organized responses like you have in the financial markets right now. And that's definitely changing how we think about the multiples of shares in fossil fuels, for example, or the companies that are served by them. Certainly going to change how we think about portfolio allocation.
Let me circle back to what I've noticed since Friday. I've had to speak to adults in the room. James Stavridis, the Admiral, Mark Kimmett, the General, Tom Beckett of the United Kingdom military, you as well, and others. We're all trying to get to clear conversation and non-hysteria over this. What should we listen for in the coming few days as this unfolds? Iraq, Iran, and the United States.
Let's watch what the Iranians do and don't say. It's very interesting that the foreign minister has focused on, in the last 24 hours, leaving the nuclear deal, but also saying they'll come back if the Europeans are able to continue to uphold and get them the sanctions off. They're focusing on the Iraq pullout of the legislature, saying that the U.S. troops should leave. If they're focusing on things that look like wins but aren't about we have to, sort of kill American military leaders, for me so far, I'd actually say the diplomacy from Iran, not the demonstrations, but the diplomacy, feels more like climb down, feels softer rather than harder. They are not in a position of power. If you're the world's only superpower, your room for miscalculation is greater. It gives me no pleasure to say that, but it's true, and the Iranians are highly aware of it.
We're going to have to wrap this up. Ian Bremmer with us with Eurasia Group. Of course, many more conversations through the morning as well. And, of course, we'll look for this out on social, particularly on Twitter and on LinkedIn as well. An important document, the Top Risk 2020 from Eurasia Group.
Thank you,
John Farrell.
Tom Keane, thank you very much. The perfect day to have Tom Keane with the team over at Eurasia Group. Much more from them through the morning. Let's cross over to Michael Barr now to get you the top stories from here in New York. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, John, in Tehran. Tensions run high today as thousands gather to witness General Soleimani's body parade through the streets of the city's Grand Mosque for a funeral service. Soleimani was killed in a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad. One woman in the crowd says President Trump has made a big mistake and the U.S. needs to pay.
We will get a hard revenge of Mr. Trump and USA because they don't have any right to kill him.
Meanwhile, President Trump insisted that Iranian cultural sites were fair game for the U.S. military, dismissing concerns within his own administration that doing so could constitute a war crime under international law. He also warned Iraq that he would levy punishing sanctions if it expelled American troops in retaliation for the U.S. airstrike in Baghdad. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham defended the U.S. drone strike. Graham told Fox News, "I'm glad that he's dead, and I'm glad we finally got a president who understands Iran is the cancer of the Middle East, and they must change the status quo."
I wish the president would tell the Iranians, here's exactly what you need to do for the sanctions to be lifted, and allow them to make a decision based on a way forward that's good for them and the region, and see what they would do.
Al-Shabaab extremists overran a key military base used by U.S. counter-terror forces in Kenya before dawn Sunday, killing 3 American Department of Defense personnel and destroying several U.S. aircraft. The World War I epic 1917 won the Golden Globe for Best Drama last night. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you very much. Some mild risk aversion this morning. Good morning to you all. Equity futures down 0.5% on the S&P 500. This is Bloomberg.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his Ph.D. at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Kathleen Hayes.
The escalating tensions seem to have moved the goalpost for 2020 equity forecast. Let's discuss that and more with Ken Peng. He's Citi Private Bank's Asia Pacific investment strategist. Suddenly, the Middle East is exploding. Where does this leave risk assets?
This is clearly an event that has long-term implications on the geopolitics, and it's quite meaningful for the people who are involved. But for global economy and financial markets, the impact might not be as long-lasting as it might seem on the outset. We looked at all the major geopolitical events over the past almost a century, since World War II, basically. And on average, we see about 4 to 5% decline initially for the S&P 500. And then a month later, that effect is kind of erased. Even if you take September 11, 2001, that's kind of the event that set off a chain of reactions that's led us here today. Even that, right? We had a 12% decline initially, and a month later we're up. The impact of the parties directly involved, like the U.S., like perhaps Saudi Arabia, is probably going to be a little bit deeper. For Asia, the impact from this Iranian issue is probably not even going to be as big as those in the U.S.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Surveillance
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 7:17 on Wall Street, and Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. Let's check the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Karen. Tensions are escalating in the Middle East. President Trump warns of disproportionate retaliation if Iran attacks a U.S. facility. Iran says it will abandon limits on uranium enrichment. Meantime, in Iraq, local lawmakers are demanding U.S. troops pull out of the country. President Trump is threatening sanctions unless Iraq repays billions in military base construction costs. New York Fed Chief John Williams says low global rates are here to stay. At the same time, he says it's important that inflation expectations don't slip too far. And on the trade front, a Chinese delegation plans to sign the Phase 1 deal next week. That's according to sources who say top negotiator Liu He and his team will be in Washington January 13th through 15th. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Karen.
Hannah, thank you. S&P futures are down about 17 points this morning. Dow futures down 156 and NASDAQ futures down 57. The DAX in Germany is down 1.5%. 10-year Treasury, little change. Yield 1.78% and the yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.2% or 74 cents at $63.78 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1.7% or $26.40 at $15.78.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1196 against the dollar. British pound 1.3152 and the yen is at 108.10. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and John.
Karen, thank you so much. And again, folks, I'm looking at dollar yen, which is through to a 107.80. It's pulled back a little bit. And again, the same kind of contained market. Yes, risk off, but I really want to emphasize I don't see panic there, as we did not on Friday as well. John Farrow at our studios, the Interactive Broker Studios in New York, and I'm Tom Keene at the offices of Eurasia Group, deep down Fifth Avenue towards New York University, for those of you that know New York City. And joining us now, John, is Derek Waltbank of Bloomberg News, not only with years of work in Washington, but also with an Asian perspective as well. Derek, if we look at the events in Iran, how will they play on the Pacific Rim? That petroleum goes around and through the Straits of Malacca and up the coast of the Pacific Rim. How will all this tension play in Asia?
Well, Tom, I think you're already, as you mentioned, you see a currency impact, and I think that's number one. I think number two is you see, havens rising back up again as people are sort of searching for something. I think overnight Asia hours, that was gold. But you see a search for what's safe anytime that one of these things comes up. And one of the biggest plays that you look at in Asia, one of the biggest things that are question marks is how North Korea is reading this. I mean, they get the news in North Korea, or at least the Kim regime does. And, as Donald Trump's trying to make some sort of deal with Kim Jong-un, every single thing that's going on between the U.S. and Iran right now is being carefully watched by North Korea. Yeah. And we don't have an inclination yet of what they think about it.
What would you think will be the response, or rather, I should say, Derek Waltbank, what will you try to observe on Capitol Hill on this Monday?
I tell you what I'm looking at really quickly. Overnight, we got a note from Nancy Pelosi that said that House Democrats are going to vote on a war powers resolution that would restrict Donald Trump's moves on Iran. Basically, what it would do is it would say that within 30 days of passage, Trump would have to quit what he's doing with Iran or get Congress to affirmatively okay it, which is a very hard vote and probably wouldn't happen. And so let's see what that vote is, particularly let's see how many Republicans come over for it. That's what I'm really interested in. Is this just a pure party line, or is there any actual backlash among the right? Right now I'm not seeing much, but I think that's the first thing.
Derek, just in terms of the markets, one thing that I've been thinking about is going back to September 14th when the Aramco assets were attacked. And I've been thinking about whether investors have been conditioned by the events that followed. Not a whole lot. Oil rolled up aggressively, then it rolled back down. And what we see in financial markets today, likewise Friday, is just contained risk aversion, just a mild move lower in risk assets, nothing big. Do you think we have been conditioned by the events of September 14th that things look big and then they don't escalate?
I think that's a really salient point, and from covering Trump for a long time, Tom will know this. I think you see a lot of that with Trump events, not just this, and not just oil area incidents, but Trump specific events. There's a certain sort of risk that you take when one of these things happens, but it's a guarded risk, right? There's still that uncertainty of what's going to happen. Even if the president of the United States says, I'm going to do X, you don't actually know that X is going to happen because people still say, oh, well, at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a status quo. If you're looking at that sort of like long-term status quo play across a lot of these crises, that's kind of where things have gone, right? Even including the trade war, that didn't get quite as bad as people feared it could, and it sort of settled into a rhythm. And so I do think that's a really astute observation. I do think that you see that playing out not just here, but in a lot of other places. So it's at least it's a defensible position for people to adopt at this point.
Derek, great to catch up with you to get your insight on the situation at the moment. Fold this into financial markets as well. Tom, as you've mentioned, investors had to go on a very, very steep learning curve over the last week or so. And I would say that for investors, it's been boiled down to a pretty simple question. Will we look back at the events of last week and view that as the point of escalation or an effective deterrence? And I think that is the most important question for investors this morning.
Yeah. Really up in the air. I really want to emphasize, folks, my take on this working through the weekend was that Friday was what it was. And John, I was really taken with how Saturday and even into Sunday was more chaotic, more uncertain, more helter-skelter than Friday was. I did not expect that, John, and I don't know what that means for Monday and Tuesday.
I think following that strike, Tom, many people expected an immediate response from the Iranians. And then we found, of course, that they were going through a period of mourning that would last for several days. They're still going through that now. And we're still trying to calculate what the next steps will be from the Iranian regime. And as far as we know, Tom, totally unknown. We're in the total unknown right now as to what their next steps will be. How do they appease the mourning at home without escalating a risk in the regime in the region?
Back to markets and for our global Wall Street audience, John, I'm observing yen through to 107.80, but again, remarkable stability. Folks, usually you'd see a stronger Japanese yen is a safe haven panic. And John, I'm going to be blunt. We haven't seen that.
We haven't seen big moves in crude either, Tom, not like we saw back in September. Brent up by another 1.21%, briefly through $70 a barrel, now back down to $69.42. Anyone waking up and wondering where equities are? Equity futures are a little bit lower, but negative 0.5% on the S&P 500. And in foreign exchange, Tom pointing out the Japanese yen. I could tell you pretty much everything in G10 is stronger against a weaker dollar. From New York, this is Bloomberg Radio.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge, wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches... Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Peoples of London, are you like Sergey, working your paws off from 9 to 5, then cooking for whole family? Well, I, Alexander, have taken the responsibility for tonight's splendid evening meal.
Ooh, let me guess, Meerkat Meals?
Of course, you know how I roll. Get 2 for 1 on food with Meerkat Meals at your local favorites, like Bistro 51, when you buy through Compare the Market.
Qualifying purchase, app only, 2 for 1 on selected food, participating restaurants, a la carte only, Sunday to Thursday, T's and C's and exclusions apply.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... Ah! But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... Ah! That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Your top story this morning, the President of the United States warning of disproportionate retaliation if Iran responds to Soleimani's killing by attacking an American or a U.S. facility. Iran in the process of mourning the dead general as the world waits for the country's next move, a market that is gripped by geopolitical risk. Equity futures negative 0.5% on the S&P 500, down a little more than 15 points. Let's call this mild risk aversion. In foreign exchange, the yen is stronger against the US dollar, but pretty much everything in G10 has a bid against the US dollar this morning, a weaker US dollar. Outside of that, no big move on dollar yen. To Tom's point, in the bond market, treasury yields coming down not even a basis point to 178 on a US 10-year. And in the commodity market, crude drifting higher. It's not an aggressive move higher. It's not like what we saw in September. We're up by a little more than 1% on Brent. We went through $70 a barrel very briefly. Right now, $69.34. I'm with you from our Interactive Brokers studios here in New York. Tom Keane with a team over at Eurasia Group, running through the top risks for 2020. And what a morning for it, Tom.
Tom, John, just extraordinary to not only do this every year, and it's a joy, folks, to start this first Monday of January every year with Ian Bremmer in their top risk. But, John, this year is particularly prescient with what we've seen the last 3 days. Within those top risks, John, what did you see that really stuck out?
Stuck out? Stunning. That number one is the United States. When we think about political risk, in a year, any year, Tom, we're often thinking about countries that are unpredictable, volatile. We're not thinking about US elections and the United States political process. And that seems to be top of the pile for the team at Eurasia.
Yeah. Well, we've got really good news, folks. John and I have had an incredible response from the idea every morning that we do 5 things. And with 2020, we're going to change this and really expand out 5 things you need to know to start your day. It's become hugely popular. Let's do that with 5 things you need to know to start your day. Brought to you by Portfolio Analysts, powered by Interactive Brokers. Savvy investors use Portfolio Analysts to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Sign up for free. Do that at portfolioanalyst.com. We thank Interactive Brokers for their 2020 commitment to what we do. John, I was absolutely thunderstruck catching up with the news flow. I'm thinking 2 a.m. this morning with the single statement from the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Chairman Engel: you are not a dictator. I have never seen that language, John, in the discourse of this nation.
In a response to a tweet, and an original situation, we've got to say, Tom, to be diplomatic about what we're seeing at the moment, the president on Twitter, 16 hours ago, saying these media posts will serve as notification to the US Congress that should Iran strike any US person or target, the United States will quickly and fully strike back, and perhaps in a disproportionate manner. Such legal notice is not required, but is given nevertheless. And truly original moment to use the platform in that particular manner, Tom. And quite clearly, as the team at Eurasia Group have pointed out, that tweet serving as a series of red lines for the Iranians now as they go through the process of calculating their response to the airstrike of last week.
Exactly. Yeah, they have to calculate it. And folks, again, this is on Air Force One flying up from Florida. And rather than the specifics of each comment, I would just go to the general tone of the president. And John, I think we have to be respectful in this debate that a large body of Americans agree with the tone of the president. You know, forget about the nuances and the niceties. There's a huge body of America after a 17-year set of wars is saying, we're done with this, which is basically the president's tone.
So the issue that we have at the moment in Iran is trying to calculate their next move. Unfortunately for the administration, Iran over the last few months, the last several months, was becoming increasingly divided. We were seeing protests on the street. What we're seeing on the streets at the moment, Tom, is a country that's becoming increasingly unified. And as the likes of Ian Bremmer of Eurasia have pointed out, Iran will now be forming the retaliation strategy. And as they do that, they have to work out how to appease the discontent at home and minimize the prospect of snowballing escalation in the region. Now, the president has set his clear red lines. He's basically told the Iranians that if you attack any American, any US facility, then you will face disproportionate response potentially from the US. So Iran can look at that and then try and work out, do we want to go that way and cross another red line, or do we want to go another way? How do we appease this outpouring of mourning that we see on the streets of Tehran today and elsewhere across Iran, and at the same time not risk the regime? And that's a delicate calculation the regime has got to go through in the coming days.
John, another idea here, and folks, this falls from Sunday into this Monday morning in New York, and we welcome all of you around the world and across the nation as well, is not Iran and not Washington, but Iraq. And what is so trenchant here, and the essays from experts from Eurasia Group, I think of Nargis Bajoli writing over the weekend in the New York Times, and other essays, John Farrow, is the idea of where Iraq is in 30 days, or for that matter, in 12 months, with everything from the U.S. pulling out to who knows what. I mean, the choice set for Iraq is extraordinarily difficult and fragile right now, isn't it?
And in the immediate term, Tom, how does Iraq's relationship with Iran evolve in the coming months? The likes of General Soleimani has spent the last 3-4 decades building out a Shia sphere of influence in the region. That doesn't end with the death of General Soleimani. And you have to look at the airstrike of last week and ask yourself quite a basic question. Has that helped or hindered the effort of General Soleimani and his work over the last 3-4 decades? There were some signs, some real signs, that the people of Iraq were turning against the Iranian influence, the increasing influence within their country in Iraq. And what we've seen over the last week, I think, is it go the other way. The people of Iraq pushing back against the Iranians and now pushing back against the United States. And that's the problem the US administration has at the moment, Tom. That actually some people might look at this situation and turn around and say they have helped the cause of General Soleimani and not hindered it with the airstrike of last week.
I think we've got to, folks, get back to almost Religion 101, which is looking at Sunni and Shia in Iran and Persia, identified with Shia, and up through southwestern Iraq, up to Baghdad, and then over as a general statement to the west. You have a more Sunni view, of course, Mr. Saddam Hussein involved in that belief, and also, of course, over to Saudi Arabia as well. Of course, John, all this folds into the markets. I go back to the note by Edward Morris of Citigroup that we saw on Friday, which is, yes, oil up. But even with that, he still frames a weaker oil price because of the new technologies and maybe tepid demand out there. It's
conditioned
really
by September.
Call on oil.
I think, Tom, conditioned by September. Yeah. September 14th, we had an unprecedented attack on the Aramco oil facilities, a key Saudi asset. Crude rolled up aggressively, then it rolled over and was back to where it was before the attacks by the end of the month. And I think many people have been conditioned by that you can have flaring geopolitical risk in the Middle East, flaring tensions, and crude can ultimately roll over again. I would point out gold as we look at the commodity market today, and I think Goldman Sachs made in the point that perhaps this is the haven asset at the moment. If you face a wall of supply really holding down the potential of crude pushing higher, you don't have that in gold. And what you see in the treasury market over the last couple of weeks is real yields starting to dive aggressively lower again, and that bringing up the story of 2019, which is as yields go lower, the diminishing opportunity cost of holding gold comes to the forefront again, and we're seeing gold at more than 6-year highs.
One thing hasn't changed from 2019 was just John Farrow's ability to plug the real yield. Folks, you can see it at 1 p.m. on Bloomberg.
Thank you for that, Tom.
With John Farrow here through the year. David Miliband darkened the door here at Eurasia Group. Let's remind our American audience there's Ed and there's David Miliband. John, I asked them about Labour Party politics in the United Kingdom. He was appropriately scathing, as you would expect, on Mr. Corbyn. But he was really open about who would take the center position within United Kingdom, more liberal, more Labour Party. What have you learned about that, John, in the last few days?
Not a whole lot, but perhaps Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, is becoming the front runner. He might be a man that could take the middle ground, though I'm seeing very little sign of that at the moment. You bring up David Miliband, I would say, remember that he was the former foreign secretary of the British government. And it's interesting to see where Europe is over the last week, Tom. They've really gone missing, and Secretary Pompeo has called them out quite boldly in the last couple of days and asked them why they've gone missing and that they haven't been particularly helpful. And this is the problem. When you go to places like NATO and you become more assertive in the way that President Trump has, even if he is correct to do so, sometimes you can isolate your allies, and those allies over the past week have gone missing.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. And, of course, Prime Minister Johnson with a statement in recent hours on the matters at hand. Right now, the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report is brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, a top 100 national university in the latest U.S. News and World Report college rankings. Learn more at news.njit.edu. Here's Nathan Hager.
Tom, Jonathan, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Apple's chief executive, Tim Cook, has taken a pay cut, but that's a relative term when you head up one of the richest companies in the world. Apple says Cook made $125 million in the 2019 fiscal year. That was down from the $136 million he made the year before, due in part to a lower bonus. Cook received a $12 million bonus in fiscal 18, his largest ever. In the latest period, Apple didn't beat sales and operating income targets. That is why his bonus shrank. They're calling it Milkman 2.0. An online grocery company based in Amsterdam is hoping to give itself a modern edge with a new twist on the old-time horse-drawn carriages that delivered milk once upon a time. The company is called Picnic. It uses electric vehicles, which it says helps it focus on less food waste, fewer miles traveled, and creating a sustainable infrastructure. And one of the high-tech advances that'll be on display at CES, the big consumer tech show coming up in Vegas, is a smart water faucet made by Moan. It's something of a mashup between a faucet and a personal digital assistant. All you have to do is tell the fixture how much water you need and what temperature it should be, and it helps you be more precise with your cooking. It will, of course, undoubtedly cause money to flow out of your wallet faster than faucets controlled by a more traditional handle. But now you can no longer say that the Internet of Things includes everything but the kitchen sink. And that is today's Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Tom and John.
Nathan, we appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir. Let's continue the conversation right here on Bloomberg Surveillance and begin by getting you some top stories from Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John. Tensions are running high in Tehran today as thousands gathered to witness General Soleimani's body parade through the streets to the city's Grand Mosque for his funeral ceremony. Red flags flown above mosques and in the streets as Iranians promise vengeance against the U.S. and President Trump. Soleimani was killed in a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad. At a campaign event in Davenport, Iowa last night, former Vice President Joe Biden reacted to President Trump's Twitter activity over the weekend with public threats against Iran.
He's tweeting a threat to go after Iran and tweet, "This is what I'm going to do." I mean, if this weren't so dangerous and so consequential, it would be absolutely mind-blowing to think a president would conduct foreign policy this way.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer remain at an impasse over witnesses in the impeachment trial. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox says he hopes to have the Senate impeachment trial over by the end of January.
I find it a political stunt for Nancy Pelosi not to send the articles over. Mitch McConnell is not going to let her run the Senate trial. Her time is over. It's now time for the Senate to dispose of these impeachment articles with a trial in the Senate. And all I can say about the two articles, they're dangerous to the presidency.
A new CBS News poll shows a three-way tie among Democrats in Iowa with Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg each at 23%. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Equity futures, negative 0.4%. This is Bloomberg Radio.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The Lee County, Florida School Board has defeated negligence and wrongful death claims stemming from the heat-related death of a high school football player. It was ruled there was no underlying constitutional violation in subjecting him to intense voluntary practice drills during the summer. It was also ruled the family of Zachary Tyler Martin Polsenberg failed to show the coach's conduct did not rise to a conscious, shocking level. Professional Bull Riders is forecasting a 25% bump in sponsorship revenue this season, including deals with new partners that include the gun rights group, the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. PBR Chief Executive Officer Sean Gleason says it's the biggest year-over-year sponsorship jump since Endeavor Group Holdings, the Hollywood talent agency and media business led by Ari Emanuel, bought the circuit in 2015. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run, mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are extending their losses and oil is building on gains as investors continue to grapple with the fallout from a U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. Gold surging to the highest in more than 6 years. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down almost 14 points. Dow futures down 130. NASDAQ futures down 47. The DAX in Germany's down 1.25%. 10-year Treasury little change. Yield 1.78%. The yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1% or 64 cents at $63.68 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1.7% or $26.50 at $15.79 an ounce. The euro 1.1198 against the dollar. British pound 1.3152 and the yen at 108.14. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and John.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Jonathan Ferro here in New York City at our Interactive Brokers Studios in New York. Alongside me, Tom Keane at the Eurasia Group headquarters. And Mr. Keane, what a day to go through the top risks for 2020 with geopolitical risk absolutely at the epicenter of price action worldwide.
Well, it's no question about that right now. We see that with the news flow and also with a little bit of a risk-off feel. There are a few other topics, John Farrow, besides what's going on in Tehran with those huge remembrances, I should say, and ceremony in Tehran for the killing of their General Soleimani. But, of course, the news in Iraq and in Baghdad. And, of course, we wake up in America, in Washington, to all that we'll see today on the battle between Capitol Hill and between the House Democrats and the president. With that, John, we could possibly talk about our Federal Reserve.
We can. The Federal Reserve very much in focus, and we can talk about the latest piece from Bill Dudley, the former New York Fed president, who writes for Bloomberg Opinion today the following. The past decade experienced a revolution in how the Federal Reserve conducts monetary policy. While new tools such as quantitative easing have received the most attention, just as significant have been the changes made in how the Federal Open Market Committee sets and controls the level of short-term interest rates. To explore this theme further, I'm pleased to say that Bloomberg Opinion columnist and former New York Fed President Bill Dudley joins us now on the phone. Great to have you with us, Bill. Just go a few steps further for us, the essence of your piece in your column today.
Well, in the old regime, the Fed basically balanced the amount of reserves in the system very carefully so that there were virtually no excess reserves in the system. That's how they set the federal funds rate. Post the financial crisis, however, the Fed's following a very different regime. There's lots of excess reserves in the banking system, and the Fed Reserve essentially runs monetary policy by setting the interest rate they pay on those excess reserves. So it's a very different regime than we had prior to the financial crisis.
Bill, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You've put out a whole series of essays. Some have made worldwide headlines. Some have moved the economic debate in this America. This essay is drier, Bill Dudley, but I would suggest it's, if anything, even more controversial than any of them. Are you suggesting between old regime and the Dudley new regime a revolution for Federal Reserve policy?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that the new regime is far better than the old regime. The old regime required the Fed to intervene on a high-frequency basis. It meant that there was basically a shortage of reserves in the system, which made the payment system less efficient. And it also meant that the Federal Reserve had one hand tied behind its back in terms of its ability to offer a lender of last resort facilities to respond to financial crisis risk. The new regime is better in all respects, in my opinion.
Well, it's a new regime, and that, does it change the voting of the target interest rate, or does it change the target interest rate focus in itself?
Well, I think what it means is that the federal funds rate, which has been the target interest rate for the Fed for a long time, is much less important, because essentially what happens is the Fed sets the interest rate it pays on reserves, and that determines the federal funds rate. I mean, I would argue that you really don't need the federal funds rate anymore as a target of monetary policy.
Bill, balance sheet operations are at the epicenter of a lot of the conversation at the moment. Over the weekend, as I'm sure you know, the American Economic Association held its annual meeting in San Diego. Adam Posen of the Peterson Institute brought up this idea of yield curve control and whether it should be used here in the United States. And I just wonder your thoughts on that, the unconventional becoming part of the conventional toolkit. Bill, what do you think?
Well, I think the problem with yield curve control is it's easy to implement, but it's hard to sort of exit. The Federal Reserve has talked about yield curve control, and I think if you look at the FOMC minutes, what they basically communicated is they think it's maybe something that they could do at the short end, and so in other words, target one-year Treasury note yields or one-year Treasury bill yields or two-year Treasury note yields, but they probably wouldn't want to do it further out the curve, try to target, say, 10-year Treasury note yields, because how do you actually exit?
Bill Dudley, is this original policy? Is this an original formation of a new regime, or is there another central bank that is out front on this in doing this?
I think it's pretty unique to the United States in the sense that our setup is quite different. We have a much bigger capital market, and therefore the money markets are much more established here. Other countries do have these kind of systems where there's lots of excess reserves in the banking system, and the European system is not that different than the U.S. But every system is different because the institutional setup in the home country is quite different.
Bill Dudley, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning. Bill Dudley, writing in Bloomberg Opinion. The Fed needs to look forward, not retreat to the past. I'm really going to emphasize, folks, this is an exceptionally important essay by Dr. Dudley. There'll be much more on this. I will try. I'm traveling to Washington after the show today. My conversation tomorrow with Alan Greenspan. Looking forward to that. And I will make clear, folks, and to Bill Dudley, if he's still listening, that we will fold this into our conversation tomorrow with Chairman Greenspan. What I want to do right now is bring up, folks, the news flow for the day. We say good morning to all of you in Boston, in New York, and Washington. And John, I look at the news flow right now, and it's almost a dearth of headlines, and you've got to believe starting at 9 or 10 o'clock this morning, we're going to get a lot of posturing out of Washington.
Very much so, Tom, but we're waiting for the big one. We're waiting for Iran's next move, and I think that holds the keys to whatever happens next in financial markets. As you've pointed out over the last couple of days, really muted risk aversion. No signs of stress, no signs of panic. Yes, risk assets have pulled back, but weren't they elevated going into this event to begin with, Tom? Equity futures down at the moment by 0.4%. We're negative 14 points on the S&P 500, set for a morning of losses after Friday's move lower. That's the equity market. In the bond market, the shape of things as follows for you. Treasury yields doing absolutely nothing. A big move lower on Friday. No follow through this Monday morning. Your 10-year yield at 1.786%. Your 2-year note 1.537% on a 2-year note. In foreign exchange, the story for you, the dollar weaker against the bulk of G10. Sterling advancing 0.5%. The euro stronger by 1/3. And in the commodity market, gold performing quite nicely through much of the session so far, and crude with a lift briefly through $70 a barrel, $69.43. This is Blue.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want movies, I've got blockbusters. Football, how about the Premier League? Or crime dramas, I've got loads. And they're never going to guess who did it. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus, month passes auto-renew, terms apply.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk,
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown.
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
The first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification. It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Surveillance, first Monday of the year. It really sounds like the business beginning of 2020. We are thrilled to tell you John Farrow is sick, and he has gone home. He made the yeoman's duty to come in earlier today, and we hope that Mr. Farrow heals and makes it through it. I've had the plague here in the last few days, and now Farrow. He got it from me, is how we're
he is blaming you on the way out the door.
Paul Sweeney. He is, and Paul Sweeney is here, and we're thrilled that we can move forward. And we do that with a very special broadcast. We welcome all of you worldwide, particularly on the Pacific Rim in your evening in Asia, to our annual visit to Eurasia Group's offices in New York. And, of course, this centers around the top risks of 2020 for Asia. Now, we do this, Paul, with a market churn here, all the news flow coming off of Iraq and Iran and, of course, in Washington, and we'll describe that over the hour as well, but certainly with futures at negative 16, Dow futures negative 158. Yields a jumble this morning. We had $70 oil, $69.42 on Brent crude, and the global litmus paper that I use, dollar yen showing me a little bit of calm there, 108.16 on yen, churning this morning. So certainly, Paul, I don't see panic out there. Do you?
I do not, and we kind of made that comment on Friday as well, but clearly a new level of risk in the market. I think the market participants across the risky asset classes, Tom, you mentioned oil, as well as the yen, trying to figure out kind of where this goes next steps here as it relates to renewed Mideast tensions.
A lot of news flow there this morning. Of course, Kevin Cirilli in Washington monitoring this as best he can. It is the top risk 2020, and of course Ian Bremmer and Cliff Kupchan and others had to rip it up and write in new ideas on, I believe, their third risk of the year, which is on the Middle East and particularly on Iran. But so much of this is about China. Maybe they don't lead this year with China. They look at the U.S. election as their lead risk. But Meredith Sumter with us, head of all their research and, of course, truly expert on China as well. What's the nuance here in China of this January versus a year ago?
A year ago, Tom, I think there was a great deal more expectation that the U.S. and China would have some kind of trade confrontation, but would find some way to resolve their differences. A year on, where we stand now, we have a phase one trade deal, but even with the deal, Tom, there is no real truce between the world's two largest economies.
Does China need a truce?
Xi Jinping doesn't believe so, and he is girding up his population for what he believes is going to be a long march to increase China's own self-reliance and reduce its dependency and risk exposure to the United States.
The dependency is around sanctions. I'm a bit confused here, as I'm sure all my listeners are, about what sanctions are coming on, which ones are coming off, the hope and prayer of getting back to some form of not laissez-faire or free trade, but at least less sanctions. Give us a sanctions update as you see it. What's the dynamic of sanctions into 2020?
Well, in 2020, I think, markets are going to be looking for a partial reduction of tariffs. But for the most part, the majority of the tariffs are going to stay in place. And we could be seeing more tough measures from the U.S. towards China this year. It's an election year.
So the bottom line on product is nothing changes? Is that right?
Not much is changing. But I'll tell you what is changing on the negative front is you're going to see a hardening of this confrontation and locking in that hardened confrontation for the longer term. So that's why we have U.S.-China as our third top risk. But tied to that is our second top risk, Tom, which is the great decoupling. This is essentially China and the U.S., the two largest economies, disentangling from one another in a way that's going to have spillover effects, not just in global technology, but in business activity, in research, in media and entertainment, in culture. You're going to have more of a risk of a true bifurcation of the global order in a way that we really haven't taken seriously since the Cold War.
So, Meredith, we have yet to see anything really on paper as it relates to phase one, so I hate to even go to phase two, but is there any sense of what phase two could encompass and maybe any sense of timing, or is this just a tweet out there in the wind?
Terrific question. I would say the president and USTR Bob Lighthizer are supremely focused on a phase two. If you talk to the actual trade negotiators on the U.S. and China side, though, who are going over the substance of what those negotiations might entail, no one seriously believes that we're likely to see a phase two negotiation reach completion. And believe me, there's a whole lot left on the table there. Phase one really is just about a partial tariff reduction, a resumption of some Chinese purchases of U.S. products, namely ag. But the core issues at the heart of the confrontation, industrial policies, subsidies, the misalignment of the Chinese economy with the U.S. economy, that all remains. And that's not likely to be fundamentally changed by onward negotiations this year.
So, Meredith, one of the things that this administration has done is it has really taken trade negotiations with China to arguably the next level, a more direct level, including tariffs and so on and so forth, a more bilateral approach, more aggressive approach. Do you think this is the new normal for U.S.-China negotiations? Or if there is another administration coming in, it might go back to something that we're more used to?
This is a new normal for U.S.-China with the Trump administration. But, even if you get a Democratic administration in office in 2021, there is still going to be a hardened U.S. approach toward China. Now, they might take and look, all of the Democratic candidates who are still in the field, not one of them has said that they would reduce tariffs on China. The difference in approach, however, might be more of a collaborative strategy with other allies to place sort of collective pressure on China to adjust its approach.
One of the things that's so wonderful at Eurasia Group is all the horses you bring here. You've got Robert T. Kaplan in helping you out, advising. Of course, his book, Asia's Cauldron, and it was my book of the year a couple of years ago. And it is about the South China Sea. Yeah. How does China right now interpret the South China Sea? Is it just as simple as they say, it's ours?
It has always been, in China's mindset, theirs. Yeah. And what you're seeing, it is, but it's what you're seeing. When we talk about the bifurcating world, Tom, for China, its reality in the South China Sea, they've built their outpost. They're exercising influence, maybe not absolute control, and maybe they don't get a chance to. Are
we showing the flag enough?
On the U.S. side, we are in the area, but I think that there's enough of a question about U.S. staying power in the region and U.S. commitment to partnerships and alliances in the region, to where the other countries in the region are already hedging their bets.
Meredith Sumter with us with Eurasia Group, folks, as we look at their top risk 2020. A lovely conversation here. Look for this on our podcast. We are thrilled to reemphasize our podcast in this January. Obviously out at Apple, Spotify, 4 other names I'm not hip enough to remember. But the podcasts have been hugely successful, and we'll lead with Bremer and Sumter this day. Do you read Chinese, right?
Yes.
Can you speak it?
Not as well as I
could. It's hard to make that leap, isn't it? What do you read in China? Explain to our audience who our kids. My child's going to take Mandarin, and that lasts for like 2 weeks. It's like violin lessons. When you read Chinese, how do you read it? What do you professionally? Is it like a Beijing newspaper you read every morning, or is it research reports or secret things that come in like on pigeons' wings, on ravens' wings, like Game of Thrones? When you read China in Chinese, what do you read?
You read a variety of different newspapers. All of them sort of state-backed, but there are different nuances with the different newspapers out there. But it's a wonderful language. And I think when you actually get into the language, you get a sense of the wholly different worldview that is coming from Beijing. And again, this sort of leads back into this bifurcated world that we're moving into. Neither China nor the U.S. is strong enough or is going to take enough of the pain to push the other off of the helm of global leadership, but they've got to find a way to coexist. And what you see in Chinese print media and in commentary, frankly, on Weibo and other social media platforms is increasingly China is looking to project its own interpretation of what international technology, international trade, international financial architecture, international rules and regulations, how those should be shaped to account for Beijing's and China's own interests, in addition to the interests of the traditional Western liberal order.
Meredith, could you just give us a quick update on kind of what is the latest from Hong Kong? We know there's been some leadership changes there.
Right. Well, we've seen actually just in the last couple of days, Beijing appointing a perceived sort of hardliner to go in and be their chief representative in Hong Kong. This is to be expected. Beijing's approach is to strengthen their reach and control over Hong Kong, even as the protests show no signs of abating. And speculation that Carrie Lam will be stepping down, perhaps later this year after the Liang Hui, China's own sort of meetings in March of their National People's Congress and Consultative Conference. She might step down, but that's not going to do anything to take the floor underneath the protests that we see happening in Hong Kong.
This has been wonderful. Meredith Sumter, thank you so much. And thank you to all your research capabilities here, the different voices we've heard this morning at Eurasia Group. Paul Sweeney, it's the top risks of 2020.
It absolutely is, Tom, and it's interesting to get Merida's perspective on it. And we know with everything that's been going on in the Middle East, we kind of got to make sure we keep our focus on China. Right now, Tom, let's head for world and national headlines with Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Tom. Angry Iranians gathered in the streets of Tehran for the funeral of General Soleimani, the target of last week's airstrike by the U.S.
Revenge must happen, and it is certain.
In response, Iraq's parliament, in a non-binding decision, has voted to expel U.S. troops from the country. President Trump also told reporters on Air Force One that the U.S. military is not leaving Iraq unless the Iraqis pay for the military bases that the U.S. has built. Officials in Pennsylvania say 5 people have been killed and dozens more hospitalized in an early morning crash on the Pennsylvania Turnpike Sunday. State police report that around 60 were injured, with the victims ranging from 7 years old to 67 years old. Their conditions are not considered life-threatening of those injured. State police described the crash as a chain reaction involving a tour bus, 3 tractor trailers, and a passenger car. The bus was traveling from Rockaway, New Jersey to Cincinnati, Ohio. Jennifer Hamady is with the National Transportation Safety Board.
It can take anywhere between 12 and 24 months for the NTSB to get to the stage of a final report where we have findings and our probable cause and our recommendation. So it does take some time.
3 of the victims killed were from New York City, and the other 2 were from Pennsylvania. There's a recall at Mercedes. The automaker is recalling about 750,000 vehicles in danger of losing their sunroofs. The recall affects the C-Class, E-Class, CLK Class, and CLS Class made between 2001 and 2011. The World War I epic 1917 won the Golden Globe for Best Drama last night. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Poll.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Looking at futures here, S&P down 18, Dow 177. Oil higher, touched 70 on Brent. We'll have some more color on oil going forward. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Robots have replaced thousands of routine jobs on Wall Street. Now they're coming for higher ups. That's the contention of Marcos Lopez de Prado, a Cornell University professor and the former head of machine learning at AQR Capital. We have seen the changes because of machine learning in finance, but how much faster could these changes occur, and what's driving this wave of change?
Well, what is driving is data. Today we have data sets that were not available 2-3 years ago. And the only way to model these data sets is utilizing these complex techniques.
When it comes to that congressional hearing that we had recently, of course, the lawmakers were very concerned about bias, whether it's racial bias and so forth in these artificial intelligence mechanisms. Is that easy to fix?
Not easy to fix, but definitely it is easier to identify bias in an algorithm than in a human. A human will make a few hundred of decisions in a year, and to identify whether a human is biased is very difficult. However, we can conduct millions of randomized control experiments on an algorithm to identify whether there is bias. And when there is bias, we can correct it. And an algorithm that was biased before this correction will not be biased afterwards. I'm much more concerned with bias in human decisions.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Futures are lower this morning. Let's go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures remain under pressure since the last time we spoke. With Dow futures down 178 points, S&P's dropped 19, and Nasdaq futures declined by 64. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.78%. Gold is at its highest level since 2013, and WTI crude futures are up 1%. Japan fell 1.2% overnight, while European markets are also under pressure, led by 1.4% declines in Germany. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 9:45, market U.S. services PMI. And in other news, Boeing has considered raising more debt, cutting CapEx and R&D, and Apple's price target was raised to $350 over at Needham. Wrapping things up among the banks, Bank of America was raised to overweight at Barclays. Citigroup cut to hold at Deutsche Bank. State Street was raised to buy at Goldman Sachs, and Travelers cut to underweight over at Wells Fargo. Live from the First Word breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
Bill, thank you. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and John.
Thank you so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate that this morning. Tom Keene from Eurasia Group offices in New York City. We're having wonderful conversations on the top risks of 2020, and of course some of that running around commodities before all the news of the last 3 days, and certainly now front and center, a print over $70 on Brent crude earlier this morning. I'm here at Eurasia Group, Paul Sweeney at our Interactive Brokers Studios in our world headquarters as well. Paul?
Thanks so much, Tom. Yeah, you mentioned oil. We had Brent. We have it at $69.45 a barrel right now. As you mentioned, it did breach 70 briefly earlier today. To get a sense of kind of what the traders are saying here as it relates to oil, we welcome Will Kennedy, executive editor covering energy and commodities. He joins us from our London studio. Will, thanks so much for joining us so clearly. Crude oil really feeling the effects of kind of these renewed geopolitical issues coming out of the Mideast. When you talk to the traders over the last day or so, what are they telling you about where this thing could go?
Well, clearly there was no dialing down in rhetoric over the weekend. Both America and Iran traded threats, which meant that we went into the start of the trading week with traders still focused on those risks. It's important to say we don't know how Iran will retaliate, but it's also in people's minds that they have used oil to make political and points in the last few months. We think back to September and that attack on Abqaiq, which was squarely put at the door of Iran by the US and the Saudis, and that knocked out 5% of global oil production in just a matter of minutes. We saw several attacks on tankers carrying oil out of the Strait of Hormuz earlier last year, and these are the things that are in traders' minds as they think about possible retaliation. That said, oil is a little bit off the highs we saw this morning, and I think there's a risk that on the other way, that unless we see some concrete retaliation from Iran in the next few days, we may see the rally of Friday and today come off a little bit.
So, Will, that kind of brings up the question about supply. To the extent that there are some disruptions like we have seen in the past, and that a lot of observers are speculating that we might see in the coming days, give us a sense of kind of where other supply might come from in the marketplace.
Well, OPEC has some spare capacity. This is happening at a time when OPEC is already cutting back production. We saw that Saudi Arabia pledged in December to produce well below its OPEC quota, so there's definitely spare capacity there. But I think the biggest change in compared with previous eras, is that we now have shale, and that as we see prices go higher, that gives an opportunity for shale producers to sell their production forward. And so the oil market has this inbuilt stabilization mechanism which wasn't there in previous decades.
Well, Kennedy, you were so brilliant on Friday doing Petroleum 101 with me, Crude 101. Let's do it again. Explain to me the kind of oil Iran and Iraq have and why that matters. It's heavy crude, right?
It's heavy. It's medium to heavy crude in the parlance, and of course, the world is awash in light crude. It's awash in the crude that produces gasoline. Most U.S. crude is light. It produces what traders call the top of the barrel, so that's naphtha, gasoline, and petrochemicals. What it's less good at producing is the diesel, the gas oil, which really drives industrial economies. So in Asia, in Japan, in China, and other big Asian economies, there's a real thirst for that heavier crude, which Saudi Arabia and Iran specializes in, which is diesel heavy and really supplies those industrial economies. So if we lose those barrels out of the Persian Gulf, obviously losing any oil is a problem, but it's a type of oil, as you say, Tom, which is particularly problematic for those buyers.
So I know there's all sorts of nuances here, but so what's the major thrust? It's thrown on a boat, goes through the Persian Gulf or outside the Persian Gulf, goes to the Gulf of Oman, turns left, and then what? Goes around India, over
goes
to
around
Indonesia,
India, and then of course it all goes
Rim?
through that. Yeah, or goes past India and through that other choke point, the Straits of Malacca between Indonesia and Malaysia, past Singapore, and then into the South China Sea and up to wherever it's going, be it Korea, China, Japan. So that's the world's most critical economic supply line from Persia through the Indian Ocean, through the Straits of Malacca, and into the South China Sea.
Tom, I think that could be a surveillance kind of field trip, kind of following Mideast crude all the way through to Asia. Will, just wondering, have we heard anything maybe over the weekend or today from OPEC or OPEC Plus as to just kind of their strategy here, or are they just sitting back and waiting out, see how things envelop?
I think that's right. I don't think they're going to rush to say anything now, because it's important to remember that no supply yet has been affected. So, there's not going to be a policy response from other OPEC producers as long as that remains the case. Their message will be to calm the market, to say, as always, we want a stable market. We will ensure supply if and when anything happens. The country where I think people will be focused on, that perhaps hasn't come into the spotlight so much in the past, though, Paul, is Iraq. Iraq is the second largest producer in OPEC, 5 million barrels a day. It really matters to our markets. It produces exactly the kind of crude that Tom and I were talking about a moment ago. And I think one risk beyond what I talked about earlier is that a spiraling political crisis in Iraq, as Iran seeks to take greater control of that country and force out the US presence, could have some impact on the oil production there. No signs of that yet, but I think that's clearly one of the risks that traders are thinking about.
Hey, Will, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you hopping on, giving us your thoughts on the global energy space. Clearly, we're having some volatility here resulting from the news coming out of the Middle East. And again, Brent crude right now at $69.36 a barrel. That's up a little over 1% today, and it did